Hey everyone, happy Monday. Thank you for joining me today. I know it's been a while since I've done a live. I said I was gonna go live last week and then I didn't go live one time. Just didn't work out, had other things going on, so decided to just skip it for the week and start again fresh this week with some different topics. In particular, today's topic is what I've been having a few people ask about on YouTube, is specifically, hey, how do I know when to increase kettlebell weight, or what kettlebell weight should I be using next? Letting me know their age and their height and their weight and all that, and then asking me to prescribe a weight. So I'm going to discuss my answer to that today, how I would answer that question. Hi, DJ, thanks for joining it. Hi, MK, thanks for being here. If you guys have specific questions about how and when to increase your kettlebell weight or kettlebell training in general, or any other fitness and health questions, I'm happy to answer them as we go along, so feel free to drop them in the chat. So, before we dive into today's topic, I have a couple of announcements. Hi, South to West, thanks for joining. So, our live topics this week, in case you did not see them yet, they are on my profile in the live tab. You can see what the topics are, and you can click the notify me button to know when exactly I'm going live and get an email reminder. So today we're talking about when to increase kettlebell weight on Wednesday at 11 a.m. because I've kind of officially switched from 9 a.m. Pacific to 11 a.m. Pacific, so hopefully it works for you guys. Wednesday, we're gonna go over relieving hamstring stiffness. So if you ever have tight hamstrings, or you feel like you have chronically tight hamstrings, you're definitely gonna wanna tune in on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we're gonna talk about exercise and mental health. So for that one, I'd love for you to bring either your questions or your own personal experience about exercise and mental health in your life. I would love to hear from you guys a little bit on your experience with that. I'm going to share some of my experience around that and some things that I've learned over the years. So that's going to be on Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. So those are our live topics for the week. One other announcement I have is that today we launched a new program inside the Kettlebell Solo membership. It is called the Lux program, okay? Because you're gonna feel really lucky when you do this program. But the program, actually, it stands for Lower Upper Core Kettlebell Split Program. So it's a 3-day-a-week program, lower body, upper body, core, and glutes mixed into that third day. And it's a progressive 6-week program. So if you would like to purchase that program, there is a link in the description, or you can let me know in the chat. You can also try 7 days free if you just want to test out the Kettlebell Solo membership and try some of the workouts from the program. You can comment trial in the comments, and I will send you a link to sign up for your 7-day free trial. And I will just drop the link to the program here for any of you guys that are interested in the Lux program. It's actually been my favorite program that I've ever created, so I highly recommend checking it out. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And it's a great way to build strength, improve mobility, conditioning, and body awareness with kettlebells. And all you really need is a few, maybe a couple of lightweight kettlebells, or if you have a set of kettlebells, you'll probably be set up. So I dropped the link there in case anybody wants to check that out. And now, without further ado, we're going to dive into today's topic, when to increase kettlebell weight. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever wondered about that and not been sure when to increase your kettlebell weight? Say yes in the comments if you've ever, been unsure as to whether you should increase your kettlebell weight or when to increase it, or just uncertain about how to deal with that question. Say yes in the comments if that's you, or if you've never thought that, never worried about it, you can say no in the comments. That's cool too. I know we got a diverse range of people with different experiences, so let me know in the comments. So, okay, so Deborah, she said yes. Anybody else have any thoughts? Have you ever struggled with how to know when to increase? It could be also dumbbell weight, barbell weight. What I'm going to talk about is going to apply with any kind of resistance training or strength training. Hello, Ahmed. Thanks for joining. Okay, so when somebody asks me that question on YouTube, okay, Gerardo has a comment here. It's hard for me to decide when to go, and also considering to increase the weight with different exercises. I may do more deadlift, but not a lot with press. Great point, Gerardo. That, of course, is part of the challenges with different exercises. You may be using different weights, or you may be progressing at different rates. So, of course, one way that you can learn how to do this is by following a progressive strength training program where you are incrementally increasing weight over a period of time, and start to learn how that's being done, so that you can then learn how to do it when you say program your own training, or you're just working out and kind of training intuitively and getting an understanding of how to know when to go heavier and how much to increase and which exercises to increase. So like any question, I've told you guys I'm not dogmatic, so I don't believe there's one way to do anything when it comes to your fitness or to your strength. So I'm not going to give you one cookie cutter answer, because there is no one cookie cutter answer, but I'm going to just kind of talk about how we can think about this so that you can better understand how to make those decisions for yourself. Because my goal as a coach is not to have to babysit you every step of the way. It's to help educate you and help you better tune into your body so you can understand how to do it yourself, so that you don't always need a coach. Over time, you can learn to get better in tune with your body and discern what's right for you. Because a coach only has, their own experience and different people they've worked with, but every person is unique. So the best way to find the best program or the best methods for you are to, over time, as you learn about your body, make better informed choices and adjustments to what you're doing. Even inside the Kettlebell Solo membership, where I program classes and programs for, a group of people, which isn't specific to any one individual, within those programs and classes, I always recommend that students listen to their body and adjust things as needed. Because there may be times where the number of reps or the way I'm recommending that you increase weight doesn't necessarily work for everybody. Again, everybody is in a different season of life. They have a different age. They have a different training background. They have different injuries they need to work with and around. So I always recommend making adjustments that are best for you. And understanding what's best for you is something that's a practice. It's a journey. Throughout life, you're going to learn how to do that better and better. But I want to remind you that you are the only person living inside of your body and experiencing and feeling what you are experiencing and feeling. So while people can give you guidance, the best person to make tweaks and adjustments to the program based on what they need is you. So hopefully today will help you better understand how to do that for yourself. Deborah said, doing your workouts when you say a light kettlebell, I know it's light for me just getting started. When we're doing thigh rainbows, I know to go light. Two-handed deadlifts, I go heavier. Absolutely. So Deborah, that's one way that we recommend, if you're using our classes and programs, that you make the adjustments for yourself and know, for example, what's light for you on one exercise versus what's heavy for you on another. Because again, I could never prescribe one weight that everyone should be using on this exercise, because what's heavy and light for somebody is relative, right? Relative, again, to their age, maybe their body size, if they're a small person or they're a bigger person, their training history, etc., genetics, okay? And a lot of things that are involved here. So in general, when people ask me what weight should they start with, because this is another really common question that I get, and I feel like it's tied into when to increase your weight. So what kettlebell weight to start with? Again, it's something that is a general recommendation, but I usually recommend starting with 5 to 15 pounds. Again, this depends on whether the person also has trained before. Have they used kettlebells before? How old are they? Have they done these movements before? So generally, I recommend 5 to 15 pounds because that's something fairly safe for me to recommend to somebody online that I don't know anything about, okay? And especially if somebody is starting with kettlebell solo, which is the way that I recommend that everybody starts with kettlebell training. It's in my years of kettlebell training over the last 13 years, this is the best way that I've found for beginners to get started and build a solid foundation for anything else they want to do with kettlebells. So I recommend the 5 to 15 pounds. I recommend staying with a light weight, whether it's, 5 pounds or within that range of 5 to 15, maybe 5 to 20, again, depending on the person, for the first 4 months or so of doing kettlebell solo. Now that sounds really light to a lot of people, okay? Or maybe to some people it sounds heavy, but if so, they probably need to start on the very lower end of things. But I recommend that you stay with that because with kettlebell solo, many people are learning new exercises. And if you're new to kettlebells, any type of kettlebell training, likely these exercises are new. And even if you've done some of them with a dumbbell or a barbell, they feel different with a kettlebell. So it's really important to set a solid foundation and to remember that the beginning of your fitness journey, or maybe if you're restarting your fitness journey, you should make it really doable for yourself. The most common mistake people make when starting or returning to a strength training or a fitness routine is they push too hard, too heavy, too fast. And that will often lead to either, burnout, they just don't have the willpower to keep working out, it's too intense, or they're too sore, or they may get injured, okay? Or they may, not set the proper foundation, and they start trying to do advanced moves or lifting too heavy too fast, and it's just too much for their body. And they don't set that proper foundation that can maybe initially doesn't lead to problems, but often down the road, it may lead to a plateau or some imbalances in the body because there wasn't enough time spent on that foundation. So it's really important to have a solid foundation and to think about the first 4 months or so of your fitness journey is just get consistent. And how do you get consistent is by staying with a sustainable routine. And that's why we recommend staying quite light for the first 4 months or so, especially in solo. Even if you don't increase weight, a lot of the exercise variations, the tempo, the isometric drills that we add in, make it challenging and progressive, even if you're using the same kettlebell weight, okay? So when you're setting this foundation, form comes first. Okay, learning your form for the exercises, even if the technique is pretty basic like it is for kettlebell solo, just getting your body adapted to it. And while your muscles may adapt quite quickly, your joints, tendons, and ligaments take longer to adapt. Okay, so your joints, tendons, ligaments, and like your nerves, because your nervous system is involved in training as well. Those things all take longer to adapt. So that's part of why you may feel like, oh, this is too easy, or I'm not sore, or I don't feel my muscles so much. But you are also preparing your joints, tendons, and ligaments. And really in the grand scheme of things, if you want to get lasting results, you're gonna be working out not for 1 year, not for 2 years, not for 5, you're gonna keep working out your whole life consistently, because that's where you're gonna get the benefits and the effect of the longevity that it's gonna help you stay fit into your golden years and be able to be as independent as possible, God willing, and to be able to participate in life fully and do activities, fun physical activities. So 4 months is really not very long in the grand scheme of things. Give yourself plenty of time. Don't make your workouts really hard right away. I know it's really easy to do that and to want to do that because it feels like when we work out harder and are sore, well, that must mean we're making more progress. That's not necessarily true. Ideally, you want just a small amount of progressive overload so you can more easily recover from the workout and actually get the benefits of the workout. So when it comes to exercise, this is all going to lead into my answer, okay, about when to increase kettlebell weight. This is all relevant, so stay with me here. And if you guys have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. So when it comes to exercise, you've probably heard this term, progressive overload. Okay, progressive overload is key to getting progress over time, to build strength, to build the size of your muscles, etc. Now, progressive overload can kind of come in a number of ways, and I feel that people often think that the main way to progressively overload is to increase the weight that you're using. Now, they're correct in that, yes, increasing the weight is going to help you with progressive overload, but it's just one of many different variables that you could adjust to progressively overload your body. So some other variables, does anybody know other variables for progressive overload that you could adjust besides increasing, say, the kettlebell weight that you're using? If you know, drop it in the comments. Let me know what you think. What other things can you adjust in your exercise routine or in your workout to progressively overload your body besides increasing the weight? If you know, drop in the comments. Let me know what you think. Or if you have a guess, Drop your guess in the comments. Let me know what you think. Okay, yes, Deborah said reps. That's right. Gerardo said increasing reps, doing tempo exercises like in solo. Absolutely, ding, ding. You guys are right on it. Any other variables that you guys think you can adjust for progressive overload besides the weight? Any other guesses? All right, so correct. Volume would be another variable you can address, which would be reps and or sets. So Deborah and Gerardo, you both mentioned that. Good one. We got exercise variation, okay? And this is something that we work into Kettlebell Solo with the type of exercise, say. So you could have like a deadlift, but then you could go to like a kickstand deadlift or a single leg deadlift, okay? So having the exercise itself become more difficult even if you're not increasing the weight. You could change your stance, okay? This is something we do in solo a lot. You don't see it a ton in other exercise programs, but changing your stance. Say you're just standing with feet hip width apart. We call that a neutral square stance. That's like kind of the easiest one, but you could also switch an exercise. Say, let's use the deadlift again. You could go into a neutral short stagger stance, okay? And so that would make that exercise a little bit more challenging because you got more, you're splitting the weight. You got a little more weight on one leg versus the other. Regressions and progressions. Okay, so that's kind of similar to the type of exercise, but also making adjustments for your body that actually make the exercise more effective for you. So maybe if a single leg deadlift is too challenging and you're just struggling too much with your balance for that to be a good use case, you could do an assisted one where you hold on to something with one arm, but you're still doing the single leg deadlift. Things like that by changing the variation of the exercise. Sometimes when we regress the exercise variation or the, the little drill that we're doing to help us move towards the full exercise, we actually may get more benefit out of it because our body is better able to execute the movement and use the muscles that we're trying to use. Another way would be time under tension. Gerardo hit on this. He said tempo exercises. So tempo exercises and adding isometrics into an exercise, that's another way to increase your strength and to progressively overload without increasing the weight. We do a lot of that stuff in Kettlebell Solo because I found it's an excellent way to build strength without getting as sore and while being able to recover more easily. So if you don't incorporate tempo, especially like slow tempo and including isometrics into your workouts and programs, I highly recommend doing that. And I highly recommend doing that before you really focus on increasing your weight because it sets a really good foundation throughout the entire range of motion, which also helps you improve your mobility. And having good mobility can be really effective defense against getting injured. The other thing we can do to progressively overload is increase or decrease our rest time, specifically if we're working on our conditioning, a little bit of our cardiovascular fitness. If we take shorter rest periods, that would also progressively overload the body, as well as frequency of training. Okay, so how many times a week or how many times a month are you training? That's another way to progressively overload without increasing the kettlebell weight. Now, this may all sound like I don't want you to increase your kettlebell weight. That's not true. Increasing your kettlebell weight is a great way to increase your strength. However, like I mentioned, I think people tend to focus on that one and not take into consideration these other factors that they could be adjusting and that they go too heavy too fast. So how can you keep yourself going for 4 months with the same weight or a very similar weight and still make progress is you can use some of these other factors here, okay? You could increase some of your reps, you could change up the exercise variation, change your tempo, add isometrics, you could shorten your rest time, or you could increase the number of times per week that you're working out. All of that is still going to help you with your goal of getting fitter and stronger. And again, with progressive overload, just like with frequency of training, more is not necessarily better. We start to think in our head, okay, the more progressive overload, the further I'm going to get. No, because you got to take into account what is your capacity to recover from. And we often like to think we have a larger capacity than we actually do. And I'm telling you that because I have been guilty of this many times, and sometimes I still do it. I think I have a greater capacity, and then I realize like I'm dragging for the next several days because I'm not easily able to recover from that workout. It was actually a bit too much for me. So I think you want to keep in mind that there's a sweet spot. You got to have some progressive overload, but if you have too much, you're not able to recover, and you're going to have to wait longer to work out, and you may not fully reap the benefits of that workout because it was just too much for your body to recover from. So I just don't recommend focusing solely on increasing kettlebell weight or doing it first. This is why it makes it challenging for me to answer a question when somebody asks me on YouTube, oh, I'm a 30-year-old male and I weigh this much, and I'm lifting kettlebell, this weight kettlebell. What weight kettlebell should I do next? And it's hard for me to answer that because I have no idea what their training program looks like, what their foundation is. And I could ask those questions, but it'll become a long kind of back and forth, and people often want a specific answer. But hopefully they watch this video to get some more information on how to think about this and how to think about how to increase weight. And generally, if you increase too heavy too soon, you're likely going to hit a plateau at some point. Okay, and that's hard, and it's harder on the body. Okay, you also increase your injury risk as you really push the weight heavy fast. Again, it's better to set a solid foundation and worry about increasing your weight a little bit later on. Another thing that's important to consider when it comes to increasing weight is what is your training goal, because this will affect how and when you increase the kettlebell weight that you're using, or dumbbell or barbell weight that you're using. So is your goal strength? Is your goal hypertrophy? Is your goal endurance, conditioning, power, weight loss? Is it sports specific? All these things have different implications for how and when to increase weight. And what they all have in common, in my opinion, is that you should set that foundation before you think about increasing weight, okay? And for something like endurance or conditioning, you're gonna wanna focus more on the variables of volume and rest time and frequency as opposed to increasing your weight, especially early on. You don't necessarily need to go heavy to work on your endurance and your conditioning, say. And similarly with power, if you're focusing on speed and power, it's not about going really heavy. At some point, it may be helpful to use something heavier to continue building your power, but initially, it's more about being quick and using a light enough weight that you can be as quick as possible. When it comes to weight loss, there are many different ways that you can achieve weight loss, and really weight loss is more related to your nutrition, to your diet, than it is to a specific way of training. Although I would argue that with weightlifting, you want to have you don't want to be super, super stressed. If your body's in a high stress state, is going to tend to hold on to fat. So you want to give yourself exercise, but generally you don't want to be doing a ton of high intensity all the time. You don't want to be lifting really heavy all the time, because it's going to take too much, it's going to place too much stress on your body, and your nervous system likely won't be able to recover. It'll be harder to shed the fat or shed the excess weight. So while you want to exercise regularly and you want to be eating in a way that helps you with that weight loss, you don't want to be overly stressing your body, because it's actually going to make it harder for you. When it comes to strength, absolutely, with strength, it can be very useful to lift heavier. Again, there's other ways, like for example, time under tension, I feel is really useful. Changing up your stance, because it's also going to help you with your mobility, and really, mobility is strength. If you are confused about that, let me know in the comments and I can elaborate. But time under tension is a great way to set a good foundation and build strength before increasing the weight on the body. Or increasing the weight that you are using. As far as hypertrophy goes, again, this will also benefit from some increasing your weight, but it's not necessary. Again, with hypertrophy, time under tension also helps you. Isometric type training also is helpful for hypertrophy. So lifting heavier and heavier is not the only way to increase the size of your muscles. The other point I want to make is that you cannot continue just linearly increasing your weight over time. So if you, increase 1 week and then you're going to increase again, and you keep going, at a certain point, you're going to hit a plateau, or you're going to drop down, because you cannot sustain that forever. It's just not how the human body works. We're not going to be able to recover from that. And especially as we get older, we don't just, the body doesn't just keep kind of growing over time. We kind of hit a peak at some point, and then we kind of start, aging, and we lose some things. We're still absolutely able to keep increasing our strength in many ways, but overall, how quick we are and our reflexes, and probably our absolute strength isn't going to be quite as high as when you were maybe 20 or 25 or whatever kind of that peak is. Some people hit that peak later in life. And of course, I'm not saying you can't continue improving your abilities. There's many masters athletes that show us that that absolutely is possible, but I'm just illustrating that point that you can't just kind of like push forever and ever and ever. It doesn't work that way. Otherwise, we'd have these superhuman people that would just, that had started training when they were 5 and they were just so strong. So undulations are important in your training routine, that you're not constantly pushing harder or heavier or faster or more reps, but you have undulations over time, and that maybe you like go up, but you're kind of going up slower, or maybe you go down for a while and then you start to come back to baseline and go up, and maybe you go down. Life is a journey, and we know that things don't always stay the same, and we never have like the exact perfect environment to always be getting better, and that's okay. And this is where it's really important to learn to listen to your body and to recover, okay? These are key to knowing also how and when to increase your weight. So listening to your body is kind of this obscure term that you might be like, well, what does that mean, Brittany? I don't know what that means. It's something you develop over time as you tune into your body, okay? So listening to your body might be, like I just mentioned, sometimes I do a workout, I get kind of ambitious, I'm having a lot of fun, and I feel great doing the workout, but for the next several days, I'm really sore and I'm dragging. My energy's dragging, I just feel tired when I nap during the day. For me, that's a sign, okay, I'm taking those signals my body gave me after the workout, probably went too hard. I'm probably not in a place for that right now, and maybe next time I do that workout or a similar one, I'm just gonna scale back sets or reps or the weight to help my body recover more easily from that. Because again, it's okay to have some workouts where you're sore and tired from them, but if that's constantly you, first of all, it takes away from your life. Second of all, you run the risk of kind of putting yourself into a hole where it gets harder to come out of, and that can lead to imbalances, injuries, burnout, etc. So ideally, you want to leave your workout feeling better than when you started, and maybe feel a little sore from your workout, or you can like feel you did something, but you're not like dying to sit on the toilet. You're like, ow, ow, ow. That's not ideal, okay? Because it also impedes with our day-to-day life. Let me check the comments here. Hi, Bucky. Thanks for joining. Bucky says, I've competed in 32 kg snatch. It took about 13 years of training to do so. Also, I still use the 8K bell sometimes when I train when working on technique. Absolutely. And as Bucky knows through training with kettlebell sport, you pretty much always go back down in weight and you work back up. So even if you've competed with the 32 kg snatch, you don't just always lift the 32 kg kettlebell, because it's a lot more stressful on the nervous system. So you go back down and you work your technique and you work your way back up to that 32 kg kettlebell. So it's a great example, Bucky. Thanks for sharing that. South to West said, make it sustainable. Best advice ever. Yes, I'm glad that resonates with you. I do think it's really important. It took me a long time to learn it. So I'm hoping to help other people learn that earlier so they don't get to the place where I got of just, completely pushing myself into an unhealthy direction with exercise. Okay, so we're going to continue down this pathway of how and when to increase kettlebell weight. When you do increase the kettlebell weight you're using, small jumps are better than large ones. Okay, seems obvious, but I'm sure there's some of you that can relate out there. You get excited about increasing weight. You just think, well, let me just see what I can do. Well, let me just see what I can do. Part of training sustainably, if you like to push yourself and you like to work out a lot, is to hold yourself back. Okay, is to just hold yourself back and say, well, you know what? I already PR'd. I don't have to try another PR today. I could wait until next week or a couple weeks later, okay, to increase my weight. So part of training sustainably, if you're that type of person, if you're a bit of an overachiever, I know there's many of those out there, is holding yourself back. Pretty much every workout, I have to hold myself back because I love working out. I used to work out 6 or 7 days a week for 3+ hours a day. This was not healthy. This was not healthy for me, okay? But at the time, I just loved it, and it worked for a while until it didn't, okay? So learn from me. There's a dosage, and you're going to feel so much better. Well, in the moment, you have to rein yourself in the long term, you're going to get much better results from your exercise if you do rein yourself in a little bit. Blue Note said, what kettlebell exercises for biceps? Well, I would say that practically any kettlebell workout where you are holding the kettlebell and doing something is going to work your biceps, but you could do I like a crush grip bicep curl where I hold on to the bell of the bell. Here, I like to do a tempo one, okay, where I go like 1, 2, 3, 4 down, and then 4, 3, 2, 1 up. That's a great one. You could do a single arm bicep curl. You could also do an around the body handoff. That's also going to work your entire arm. Shoulder rainbows are great. Going to focus a little bit more on the triceps, lats, and obliques, but also great for the biceps. Okay, so different exercises may progress differently. So if you're thinking about increasing weight, somebody mentioned it here at the beginning. Gerardo, I think that was you. You may increase differently with different exercises. So you don't necessarily need to use your same weight for your whole workout unless you only have one kettlebell, in which case it's better to do exercise with your kettlebell than not, even if you don't have the perfect weights. So it's okay if you don't have the perfect weights, but you may progress differently with, say, a deadlift. A deadlift is for most people fairly easy to progress and go heavier sooner, as opposed to maybe an overhead press. That's probably going to take longer for many of us, or a bent row. That might be faster than an overhead press, but not as heavy as fast as a deadlift. For a squat, you may be able to go heavy sooner because it's mostly a lower body exercise. So it's going to vary per exercise. Something that can be really useful, and again, this depends on how you're working out, whether you're doing random workouts, whether you're doing a progressive program. If you're doing a progressive program, I recommend mostly following that program and then just making adjustments that are better for your needs. Because as I mentioned, no program, unless it's specifically designed for you, is going to take into account everything you have going on in your life. Even if it's specifically designed for you by a coach, you may still need to make some adjustments based on how you're feeling and what's going on with your body. So it can be really useful to think about focusing on like one exercise per workout, say, that you're going to increase in weight. And again, this depends exactly how you're training. If you're doing, there may be some weeks where you don't increase your weight at all, because again, it's good to have like undulating or times where you stay light. So that you're not always pushing your weight. But say you are working on increasing your weight. Something that could be useful is choosing one exercise in your workout to focus on increasing the weight on and keeping the rest the same. So often when people think of progressive overload with using more weight, they think, oh, I got to increase weight on everything. You don't have to increase weight on everything or in your entire workout to get progressive overload. The great thing is if you say increase the weight on your deadlift, but you keep the weight the same for, say, your squats and your overhead press and your bent row, you are still going to be challenged more on those exercises because going heavier on the deadlift takes more out of your body, and then those other exercises will subsequently be just a little bit more challenging, or maybe a lot more, depending on how challenging that weight on the deadlift is for you. So you can think about just focusing on one exercise to increase the weight, and then maybe the next workout or the next week, you focus on a different exercise. Okay, now I'm going to increase the weight on my squats and drop back down on my deadlift to my previous weight and kind of cycle it through that way. So that's one approach to how to increase your weight. And again, I recommend small jumps. So again, this depends per person, so I can't give you an exact thing, but say you're lifting an 8 kg kettlebell, an 18-pound kettlebell, okay? 8 kg is 18 pounds. And you have the option of either going to the 10 kg, the 22-pound kettlebell, or jumping up to the 12 kg, 26-pound kettlebell. I would recommend going to the 10 kg first, okay? Incremental jumps, because if you can get benefit of that kettlebell, use that and get the benefit of that before you jump up. Again, this is a better way to train safely and sustainably and remain consistent than to push harder and heavier. Harder and heavier isn't always the best thing to do. You may be missing out on some lessons you get from that 10 kg kettlebell if you skip right away to the 12. Okay, so increase incrementally. When in doubt, it's always best to stay at a lower weight. Just because you've used a weight for a period of time doesn't mean you're not getting any benefit from using that same weight. You're still getting benefit, especially in terms of like your blood flow, your mobility, getting your heart rate up, even if it's not always pushing the progressive overload, okay? You need progressive overload over time, but it doesn't mean every workout or every week you need to be progressively overloading, especially if, say, you feel tired one week. Say you maybe overdid it the week before, and you're supposed to increase your weight this week, but you feel tired. What should you do? You know, many of us would push through anyway and say, well, I got to do it this week because it's written down here on this here program. Okay, but that's not the best way to move forward. If you are feeling really tired, it's probably better to scale back your workouts that week so you can go harder later. If you push yourself through anyway, you may continue feeling fatigued for longer because your body's still trying to recover. It gets pushed, and now it's got to recover from even more. So tune into your body and make those adjustments as needed. So again, that's another factor in terms of increasing your weight. Maybe you increased last week, but you need more time to recover. So maybe you don't increase the weight again for a while, or you drop back down and then you try it again. Okay, so there is no exact formula, but it's best to be cautiously progressive. And it's never worth pushing a heavier weight that feels iffy and to risk tweaking or injuring something. It's never worth it. First of all, your body remembers every injury you've had, so it can crop up again later because it creates like a, kind of an imprint in your nervous system. Like your body remembers those things. So ideally, we're all going to get tweaks and injuries here and there, but we want to minimize our risk of doing so. So anytime you're thinking about going heavier, maybe you're thinking about with that overhead press, say you're thinking about increasing the weight on it, but the weight you normally use is feeling a little like clicky in your shoulder today. And you're kind of like, doesn't feel great, but I'm supposed to go heavier today. You know what? It's always better to just don't go heavier. See how your shoulder feels next week. Maybe increase next week. Okay, it's never worth it because as soon as you tweak or get some kind of injury, you go, oh, why'd I do that? So try to get just a few steps ahead of yourself. PC has a question here. Hi, can every minute on the minute exercises help in building strength and muscle? So PC, that's a good question. So for those of you who don't know, EMOM, E-M-O-M, means every minute on the minute. It means you do an exercise at the top of a minute. So you do 10 squats, and maybe that takes you 25 seconds, right? And then you rest the other 35 seconds, and then you do 10 squats again, and then you rest. It's that kind of idea. You could do it with many different exercises in different ways. Well, I think EMOM is like a fun way to work out. If you're trying to build strength, that's not the most efficient way to build strength because you're working more of your conditioning there because you only have a limited time to rest before you got to go again. So that's the type of workout that's going to get your heart rate up, and it will build some strength endurance, that your ability to keep going under, a higher heart rate, but it's not the best way to build strength. So depending on how you're defining strength, is strength like you want to get stronger overall and lift heavier weights? I would not recommend every minute on the minute. Generally, to get stronger, you need at least 2 minutes of rest after a challenging bout with a heavier weight. Again, this depends on how heavy and how hard you're pushing yourself, but generally for strength, it's better to take more rest and let your heart rate come down and let your muscles recover before you push again. This is also going to decrease your injury risk, especially if you're lifting heavier. The shorter the rest period when you're lifting heavy and pushing yourself to a higher part of your capacity, the greater your injury risk becomes. So EMOM is great, but it's probably something you want to do with a light to moderate weight kettlebell that's going to work your strength endurance and your conditioning, your cardiovascular fitness. It's not specifically, that's not the best way to build strength and muscle. Building strength is about, being able to handle heavier weights or greater time under tension and some of the other ways we talked about building strength. Muscle is that's going to fall under like hypertrophy training, which is generally like 8 to 12 reps, and you're you're getting closer to failure, but you don't need to be like at failure. But in general, that's not going to be every minute on the minute either, because you're going to need to have more recovery for hypertrophy as well. Mel said, thanks for the advice. I'm new to kettlebell, was thinking of going heavier, but it's iffy. Probably saved me from an injury. You're welcome. I'm happy to help with that. I really want to help people avoid injuries and be able to be consistent, which comes from that sustainable exercise. Mel, how long have you been lifting kettlebells? I don't know if you were here at the beginning, but I recommend that people take at least like 4 months, maybe even 6 months, to just think about setting a foundation and not worry about whether you're, doing the perfect progression, and just getting really comfortable with the exercises, getting into a regular routine, maybe trying some of the other ways to progressively overload that I mentioned, which would be increasing like sets and reps, changing the exercise variation, changing your time under tension, adjusting the frequency of how often you're training, as opposed to thinking about increasing weight right away. Yeah, so Mel said 2 to 3 months just doing basics. So keep doing what you're doing, Mel. That's awesome. I'm excited that you're getting into kettlebells and you've been consistent for 2 to 3 months. That's huge. Keep it going and just get really comfortable with the exercises. You will know, as you tune into your body, you will know when like, okay, this is like really too easy for me. I can go up. Like, you should feel very confident about it. And again, like you said, if you're feeling iffy, it's not worth it. Take your time. Again, you're still getting benefit. You're still getting benefit from it, and you're really just at the beginning. You're just setting your foundation, and you will get there. You can always push harder later. You can always go heavier later. But when you do it too early, that's unfortunately where people risk something happening that stands in the way of their ability to be consistent. So think about first just making your routine really sustainable, and even err on the side of like it feels a little too easy. Because if it feels too easy, first of all, you're not going to dread your workout. Second of all, you're going to make it very sustainable again. So that's going to help you in the long run. You're just in that very first part of your training routine. So I think if you take it slow earlier, you're going to be much better off in the long run. And don't worry, the results will come. Just most important is that you stay consistent over time. PC said, thanks for the reply. I'll try increasing weight and increasing rest time to 2 minutes. You're welcome. Are you following a specific program, PC, or how do you train with kettlebells? Hi, Marco. Thanks for joining. Okay, so I got some more things to tell you guys. I didn't quite realize I was going to have this much to say about the topic of how or when to increase kettlebell weight, but it's actually kind of a good topic, okay, because it is not as simple as it may seem. It would be nice if there was one easy answer to it, but really there's a lot of different things to think about. So when you increase weight, it's really important that you, one, feel really confident with your form for the exercise you're going to increase on. So you should feel very confident that you are using the right muscles, that you're not, nothing's feeling tweaky, that your form is where it needs to be. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you need to make sure, again, that you're using the right muscles. So make sure that's there before you increase weight. If that's not there, keep practicing, okay? Maybe get some feedback from somebody, but keep working on it. Don't worry about increasing weight yet. It's much better to set a good foundation with your form. 2, don't increase your weight for everything at once. I mentioned this earlier. Think about increasing your weight maybe for one exercise, and then maybe the next time or the next week, you could think about increasing it for a different exercise. And 3, make sure that you drop down regularly to solidify your foundation. Now, something I've noticed in dropping down my weight, okay, I've competed with double 24 kilo kettlebells, double 53 pound kettlebells in kettlebell sport. And when I drop back down to using a 6 kg or an 8 kg kettlebell, I sometimes feel an exercise more than when I lift heavy for that exercise. Now, why is that? I think our body can become efficient it can be very efficient at doing something. And sometimes that means it's either using different muscles, or maybe it's not contracting as hard because it needs to lift this heavy weight. So I've actually found there's a lot of benefit, and I've filled some different gaps that I was missing in my foundation by dropping back down in weight. I also mentioned with kettlebell sport, for example, you always drop back down at the beginning of a training cycle before working back up. So it's to give your body a break from the heavy weight, to solidify your technique, to set your foundation, maybe get a little better with that weight before you ramp back up. So make sure that you drop back down every once in a while to give yourself a deload and to solidify your foundation with that lighter weight. And then 4, make sure that you monitor your recovery afterwards, okay? So that's one way you can check in and learn to listen to your bodies. How do you feel after that workout? How do you feel after you increase the weight for deadlifts? Were you very sore? Were you not sore? Were you tired? Were you, do you feel really good? How does it feel? Are the right muscles sore? Checking in with yourself. How long did it take me to recover from that? Ideally, not very long. The other thing I want to say about increasing kettlebell weight is that there's a lot of people out there in the fitness space or fitness experts that are recommending that you need to lift heavy. Women who are in midlife, you need to lift heavy, okay? You need to lift heavy for this, that, and the other thing. Lifting heavy is great, but the problem is that they're not putting this in context, okay? When should you lift heavy? How often should you lift heavy? What does lifting heavy even mean? Okay, so lifting heavy and pushing yourself to kind of this upper level of your capacity, where you're really not able to do much more, or it gets your heart rate up quite high. This is kind of pushing your capacity. If you try to do that every workout, it's a recipe for burnout and injury, okay? Or if you're pushing progressive overload in a different fashion, okay? If you're always increasing your reps or always increasing your sets, or you're trying to increase your exercise frequency every week. I did 3 workouts. Next week I'm going to do 4, then I'm going to do 5, then I'm going to do, this is a recipe for burnout and injury. So you want to be smart about it. Lifting heavy is great, but you don't need to do it all the time to get the benefits. In fact, it's better not to do it all the time. Most of the time, you should be lifting, I would say 80 to 90% of the time, your workout should be easy to moderately hard. Okay? Just 10 to 20% of the time, you push harder, lift heavier, and really push your capacity. Okay? That's something I've found to work really well for myself and kettlebell solo students. So you are being challenged, but most of the time, your workout should be fairly easy, because that's the way you're going to stay consistent. That's the way you get a sustainable routine. And again, that sustainable routine is how you make progress. So just because you're not lifting heavier doesn't mean you're not continuing to make progress. And I've said this already like 7 times during this live, but let me just reiterate it again. The most important key to results is consistency. Okay, so the lasting results you want, getting results that will last, that you don't just, work really hard for 8 weeks, I dropped 20 pounds, but then you gain it back the next few months. The way to get lasting results, to get results that you can easily maintain, it means your routine must be sustainable. If it's not sustainable for more than 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months at most, you're not going to keep doing it and your results will go, right? You need to find something that's sustainable, okay? And so that's where that 80 to 90% of the time, easy to moderate workouts. In my opinion, people try to make their workouts too hard too often, and it makes it difficult for them to continue working out, okay? Not just physically, but also like psychologically, okay? If you have to suffer every workout and you know it's going to be really hard, you got to really psych yourself up to do it. As opposed to if it's enjoyable, it's fun, it's not that hard, you'll do it. You'll enjoy it, and that's important too. I mentioned this in the beginning, but if you still aren't totally sure about how to increase weight, I recommend following some kind of progressive training program, okay, that is geared towards your goals and learning the principles that are behind it as to how to adjust training variables and to ensure progressive overload. So that could be a program that's helping you learn how and when to increase the weight, or how to, and when to increase sets and reps, depending on what it's focusing on, okay? We have a bunch of those different programs inside Kettlebell Solo. So if you wanna know how to increase your strength with kettlebells, how to increase your endurance, conditioning, your consistency, we have programs for all of that. And you can learn by doing and looking at how those are programmed and get an idea of, okay, this is how I'm progressing, okay? Maybe that's something I could apply, to when I'm not doing this program, to my exercise. We do this in Kettlebell Solo. So we give our students progressive overload in Kettlebell Solo, which is the membership I run, kettlebellsolo.com. We have programs, classes, challenges that we run all year long. We create a year-long program that focus on various aspects of fitness, okay? Because this is also important if you're always trying to increase weight. Okay, you're just pushing the weight and pushing the weight, or pushing the reps and pushing the reps, and you never let yourself come back down, or you never focus on a different aspect of your fitness, that's not very well rounded. So we come up with a year-long program that focuses on different things. For example, we may focus on a strength program, and then we may have a conditioning program, we may have a mobility program, we may have a breath work program, we may have a endurance program. I don't think I said that already. A program that's focused on short workouts but being consistent, and we vary that up throughout the year. So you have different periods of time where you're focusing on different things, and you get a well-rounded fitness without getting burned out on constantly doing the same thing. So if you want to know more about how to do that, feel free to comment below. I have a 7-day challenge, a kettlebell solo challenge you can join. It's great for beginners, or if you want to grab your 7-day free trial of kettlebell solo, you can check out all of our classes, programs, and challenges for free. Comment trial, and I will send you the link to sign up. Speaking of which, I just launched a new program. I said at the beginning, I'm going to say it one more time. It's called the Lux program. It just launched today. It is a 6-week kettlebell program, 3 days a week. It's called Lux, which stands for Lower Upper Core Kettlebell Split Program. So it is kind of a split program that helps you with strength, hypertrophy, conditioning, body awareness. The first day is lower body, second day is upper body, and then third day is core and some glutes. Okay, and this is a 6-week progressive program. So this is actually would be a great program if you want to learn more about how to progressively overload different variables in a training program. You're going to want to check out that program. Again, if you want, you can comment Lux, or you can comment trial, and you can get that 7 days and check it out for free. Any questions about increasing kettlebell weight or kettlebell training in general? Or any fitness questions, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts on anything I talked about, let me know. I've been talking for quite a long time, so I'm happy to take some of your questions now that I'm getting off my soapbox. I also love to take topic requests. As you guys know, if you've been here before, if you have any ideas for live topics you'd like to see, maybe next week, let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I just choose whatever topics I'm interested in, or like today's topic, what I get questions about on YouTube, so I can hopefully address those questions. I figure if people are asking me in comments on my videos, there's probably other people who have similar questions. If you want to learn more about how to relieve hamstring stiffness, that's what I'm going to be talking about on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. We're going to talk about how to relieve hamstring stiffness. So you're essentially going to feel like you have new hamstrings after I show you a few of these drills. So make sure you don't miss that one. Ed asked, are you a fan of adjustable kettlebells? It's a great question, Ed. I have an adjustable kettlebell that I got a few months ago, and I have yet to actually use it at all. I got the Bells of Steel competition kettlebell adjustable. It's here. It's that one. But I have yet to use it much. So I guess you could say I'm not a huge fan of adjustable kettlebells, just because it always seems like it's in some ways more work than it's worth to adjust the kettlebell. So for that one, you have to unscrew it, and then you got to unthread the bottom, and then you got to pull some of the plates out or put them on. So it's a bit of a pain, honestly, but I haven't spent a lot of time using it, so I'll have to get back to you on that. But in general, I prefer just regular kettlebells. And especially when you're starting out, well, it may be useful if you're starting out to have an adjustable if you're usually just going to use one weight, but I don't think they're very practical for if you want to use multiple weights in one workout, because you'd have to go and adjust it for one set and then adjust it. It would just make your workout take a lot longer and be quite cumbersome. So in general, I prefer just having different weights, but I know for some people, maybe financially it's not doable, and an adjustable kettlebell is just better, or maybe they don't have a lot of space to store a kettlebell, and adjustable could be really useful. Or if you're using the adjustable specifically for a certain weight range, like heavier, and it's useful to have one where you can make small adjustments so that you're not just, because most kettlebells jump 4 kg, 2 kg, or 4 kg increments, but maybe you need just a 1 kg increment, and your adjustable kettlebell allows you to do that. So it could be useful for that as well. Gerardo asked, if a person stays with the same weight, there may not be progress, but are there any drawbacks? Thinking about how we're always supposed to change things up and challenge ourselves constantly. Gerardo, I actually disagree with that supposition that you're supposed to change things up and challenge yourself constantly. I think that that's like a false premise that some people put out there. You need to change things up. You do need to change things up, but you don't actually want to change them up all the time. Like, say if you're changing up every week or every workout, you're not really giving your body, you're not really able to progressively overload, because if you're constantly changing things too much, your body isn't able to like get the proper progression. So in many ways, like say if you want to increase your deadlift weight or your reps, you need to be doing deadlifts over and over again and making maybe small adjustments over time, as opposed to like doing random different workouts or different exercises constantly. If you stay with the same weight, again, you actually can make progress. This is part of what we teach in solo. You can absolutely make progress with the same weight by adjusting those other variables for progressive overload that we talked about. If the drawback might be, say, if somebody uses a 10-pound kettlebell and they don't change anything about their workouts and they use that same weight and do the same reps and do the exact same thing for like a year or 2 years. Now, I would still argue that's better than not working out. You're still getting benefits from that. So I don't think that that's a bad thing per se, but you may not see the progress you want to see if you're using the exact same weight and doing everything the exact same way for long periods of time, for like a year, for 2 years. So I do think you need to change things up, but it doesn't need to be all the time. For example, with Kettlebell Solo, most of our training programs are 4 to 6 weeks long. So we have 4 to 6 weeks where we're focusing on the same exercises each week. So for example, with the new program we're doing, the Lux program, one day is lower body day. So every Monday for those 6 weeks, we're doing the same exercises and the same workout with some small variations. Okay, so maybe one exercise, something shifts a little bit. So you're making little adjustments, but you're doing essentially the same workout for 6 weeks long because you want to actually get the adaptation to it. So I hope that answered your question, Gerardo. If you have any follow-up questions, let me know. Any other questions? Okay, Ed said, I've been doing a lot of single-hand kettlebell, clean and press, swings, Turkish get-up, only on 12 kg though. I'd like to get into two-hand kettlebell workouts. When do you think it's a good timing to start? I only have a 12 and 16 right now. Ed, how long have you been lifting kettlebells? Awesome, Gerardo. I'm glad that was helpful for you. Okay, Ed said he's lifting about a year plus. How confident do you feel on your form for your clean and press, your swings, and your Turkish get-up? Because even though these exercises, even if you've been working on them for a year, many people take years and years and years to truly master these exercises. Now, it's not to say you can't increase or start to lift with 2 bells if you haven't perfectly mastered it, because you can continue mastering it your whole life long. But you want to make sure that you feel very confident with, excuse me, very confident with the form of the exercises you're doing before you increase weight, like I mentioned. And generally, if you're going into 2-hand work, well, first of all, the technique is going to be a little different. It's going to feel a little different. There's mostly similar, but there's going to be differences in it. And you're generally going to be using more weight, because if you have been using just a 12 kg, but you want to go doubles and you get 2 12 kgs, you're going to be lifting double the weight that you were lifting. So you may want to get, say, 2 8 kgs, so you're not increasing by as much, or continue building up with your single kettlebell for a while until you're more comfortable, even with lifting 20 kg before you grab, double 12s where you'll be lifting essentially 24 kg. For some exercises that, that's not quite 20, like doing a 2-arm press, say, is obviously different than doing like a 2-arm press with 2 12s is different from doing a 1-arm press with the 24, right? 2-arm press with the 12s is likely going to be easier as far as the weight goes, but there's a mobility factor there as well. So Ed, that is one thing you want to consider with especially presses, like overhead work with 2 bells, that's going to require better mobility. So you do want to make sure that you have good mobility in the overhead position, not just with one arm, because with one arm we can kind of compensate in different ways. But with 2 arms overhead, it's much harder to compensate. You need to make sure you have both the shoulder mobility and the upper back mobility. Some people, if they're a little bit here with their upper back, they're going to have a hard time getting their arms overhead. They're going to have to use the lower back to get their arms there, and that can cause some issues. So you want to make sure you take a look at your mobility and that you have that available to you. And if not, you might want to work on that before doing, say, two arm presses overhead. That wouldn't be so much of an issue with 2 arm swings. So I guess my answer is, you said when is a good time to start? You know, I think it's good to get pretty comfortable with a single kettlebell, but that's not to say you couldn't also work in double kettlebell exercises. Just because you start doing double bell work doesn't mean every exercise needs to be double either. So, you know, you could start working in, say, double swings or whatever exercise you feel most, double kettlebell deadlifts. So I think you could probably start working some of those in now if you're confident on your form and, you know, you're not experiencing any lower back stiffness, tightness, or pain. Ed also said, I've never been looked at by trainers. I mostly train at home. I do recommend, if you are able to, doing at least a few sessions with a trainer, because there's just so much that is difficult for us to see when looking at ourselves. But in lieu of that, if you don't have the budget for that or you're not able to, taking video of yourself from the side, from the front, can be a really, really useful tool. So I would, if you haven't done that yet, Ed, with single bells, I would take some videos of yourself and just kind of take a look and maybe see how is your form looking. Do you feel confident with it? Khalid said, my shoulders are uneven. Is there any type of exercise or workouts to fix that? Because nowadays I feel pain in my uneven shoulder. Sorry to hear that, Khalid. I can't tell you a specific exercise because I don't have more information. I don't know how your shoulders aren't even. I'm assuming maybe you mean like one is higher than the other, or maybe one's smaller or not as strong as the other. You would need to figure out kind of, or get an idea of what the root cause is of why your shoulders aren't even. Because say there's like a little bit of one up, one down, that could be due to stiffness or tightness in your traps, in your neck, in your lats, in, you know, it could be in your hips. It could be in a number of things. So there's absolutely things you can do to work on it. I would definitely take a look at your mobility and maybe start working a little bit on just exploring gently and pain-free. Don't ever push through pain or force anything. I do not recommend that. Especially if you have pain or stiffness or an injury, but gently exploring the ranges of motion of your shoulder and maybe seeing where you might be limited, and that may give you some more information as far as what's tight or weak or what may be causing that unevenness. You're welcome, Ed. I'm glad that was helpful for you. Let me know if you guys have any other questions on kettlebell weight or kettlebell training in general. Before we sign off today, remember on Wednesday, I'm going to be doing relieving hamstring stiffness. Probably, even if you don't have stiff hamstrings, but you just want to improve your range of motion, your hamstrings, you're definitely going to want to join on Wednesday. There's one exercise we're going to do, which is like the magical hamstring exercise. This was something that helped me a lot improving my hamstring mobility. And I already had pretty good flexibility and mobility, but made it way better. And if your hamstrings are tight, this is going to work wonders. You're going to want to join that 11 a.m. on Wednesday. And then Thursday, we're going to talk about exercise and mental health. I'm going to share a little bit of my story throughout my exercise history and mental health with regards to exercise. It may be a little different than you think. So definitely show up for that. And feel free to bring your experience with exercise and mental health on Thursday. That's going to be at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. Any last questions? All right, well, I appreciate you guys joining me today. If you have any other questions, you can bring them on Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great Monday, and I will see you on Wednesday.